this moment and make it into a movement and start to address the structural and systemic issues that plague our communities all across the country. You know, what's extremely problematic for me as a young person, I gotta tell you that, you know, I'm raising 2 little girls in the heart of West Baltimore. I find it extremely problematic that when we step foot outside of Baltimore City, the first thing out of anybody's mouth is it really like The Wire? And now with the riots and the looting that took place, we can't seem to get that branded image of our city out of people's perceptions and minds. Well, how do we do it? At the end of the day, I decided I was going to run for Baltimore City State's Attorney. And I embarked on a journey that was not easily rooted in an abundance of external support. I sat down with any politician, business owner, community and clergy leader to ask for their guidance and support in my endeavor. And to my dismay, although I sat down with these young people, these individuals, and asked for their support, they left with, I walked away from those conversations and people had optimism for my vision, but skepticism in my ability to carry out my vision, which was problematic because I saw time and time again that it was a very small number of individuals that were defining the perception of our city. A city that was more than what was depicted when we turned on the news and when we opened up the newspaper. You see, a small number of individuals that were violent repeat offenders. And so when I started to embark on this journey, I was trying to get the support, and so many people told me that I was too young, that I was too inexperienced, that I couldn't raise enough money, that me potentially running against an incumbent with powerful backers who had the ability to outraise me 4-1 would not only interrupt my career, but potentially destroy my husband's career. And I had to make, in that moment, a decision as to whether or not the naysayers would define my destiny, or whether I would allow God to allow me to walk in my purpose. And so, I tell you this because you guys are already on the right direction. You guys already get that we have to form community partnerships in order to impact the injustices that so ever clearly present their strongholds on our communities. But I also tell you this because it's time to make the most of this moment. It's time to utilize this moment and make it into a movement. I can tell you that when I won the state's attorney for Baltimore City, so many people said that it could not be done, and it was. And I have to believe that God was preparing me for a greater sort of purpose. You see, when my first introduction to the criminal justice system was when I was 14 years old. And my cousin, who grew up with me like a brother, he was killed right outside of my home in broad daylight. You see, we both had aspirations of being first-generation college students. He wanted to go on to college and become an architect. I wanted to be an attorney. And if it wasn't for the testimony of a neighbor who not only cooperated with police, but he testified in court, my family wouldn't have received any sort of justice. This was my first introduction to the criminal justice system, practices we can employ right here in Baltimore City. I traveled to Brooklyn, I traveled to Manhattan, I went to San Francisco, I went to Atlanta, I went to DC, all so that we could see how we could get to those violent repeat offenders and break down these barriers of distrust. And I gotta tell you that in the short 6 months that I've been in office, it's been rather busy, very busy. And I've shown from the beginning that justice will be applied fairly and equally to all of those, no matter your color, your creed, your occupation, your religion. And I tell you this because it's so important for us to realize